In the Imperium of man, fear is a luxury long since burned away. Worlds die screaming every hour. Civilizations vanish between heartbeats. And standing at the center of this endless slaughter are the Space Marines, gene-forged demigods engineered to know no doubt, no mercy, and no fear. They charge into hell itself without pause, fight demons that unravel sanity, and face extinction-level horrors with cold discipline. Death is not something they avoid, it is something they expect. And yet, hidden deep within the cold machinery of Imperial law, there exists a single rule so absolute that even these angels of death obey it without protest. Not because they respect it, not because they agree with it, but because they understand, better than anyone, what happens when it is broken. Most citizens of the Imperium will never know this law exists. They live their entire lives believing Space Marines are above consequence, above judgment, above the reach of any authority save the Emperor himself. To the common man, an Astartes is a living miracle, a walking weapon sanctified by victory and untouchable by mortal law. Governors bow. Generals defer. Entire systems surrender authority the moment a Space Marine sets foot on their soil. The myth is comforting, that humanity's greatest defenders are beyond corruption, beyond punishment, beyond control. But myths are dangerous things in the Imperium, because they hide the truth. And the truth is this: Space Marines are not free. They never were. Long before the Imperium rotted into dogma and desperation, before the Emperor became a corpse on a throne, a decision was made in fear. Not fear of aliens, not fear of chaos, fear of Space Marines themselves. Because power without limits is not protection, it is annihilation waiting for an excuse. So a law was written, simple in its wording and merciless in its intent. A law designed not for traitors, but for the loyal. Not for monsters, but for heroes. A law whose punishment is not death, but something far worse. Something Space Marines understand with terrifying clarity. They do not speak of it openly. Chapters do not record it in their public histories. It is taught quietly, passed down like a genetic flaw alongside their gene seed. Every initiate learns it eventually. Every chapter master lives with it constantly. And every Space Marine knows that the moment this law is broken, no matter the reason, no matter the justification, the Imperium will not rage, will not debate, will not even accuse. It will simply erase. Names will vanish. Victories will be reassigned. Gene lines will be sealed or destroyed. And it will be as if they never existed at all. This is the one Imperial law that even Space Marines fear. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because what you'll discover isn't just a rule, it's a warning. A warning written in blood, silence, and erased history. By the end, you'll understand why this law exists, why it has never been repealed, and why even the most loyal Space Marine chapter would rather face annihilation than risk crossing it. To understand the weight of this fear, you first have to understand what a Space Marine truly represents. An Astartes is not merely a soldier, he is the end result of forbidden science, brutal selection, and sacred indoctrination. He is stronger than any human, faster than any predator, and more disciplined than any army. Where ordinary men rely on numbers, Space Marines rely on certainty. They are taught that hesitation is death, doubt is weakness, and obedience is survival. From the moment they are remade, they are told they exist for one purpose only, to serve the Imperium without question. And for most of Imperial history, that service has placed them beyond scrutiny. Space Marines are granted extraordinary autonomy. They choose their own battlefields. They interpret their orders as they see fit. Entire wars are decided by their judgment alone. When they arrive, laws bend. Protocols shatter. Civil authority dissolves. The Imperium tells itself this is necessary, that such power must be trusted, because without it, humanity would already be extinct. And for a time, that belief holds. But absolute power always demands a price. The Imperium is not naive. It is cruel, paranoid, and deeply experienced in betrayal. It has seen heroes fall, saviors turn executioner, and loyalty rot into ambition. It knows that Space Marines are not immune to corruption, not of the flesh, not of the mind, and not of purpose. And so, buried beneath ceremony and reverence, the Imperium keeps its final safeguard. Not a weapon, not an army, a law, one so severe that it is rarely spoken aloud. One so final that it does not threaten punishment, it promises oblivion. This law exists not to control what Space Marines do on the battlefield, but to define what they are never allowed to become. It is the line they are forbidden to cross, even if crossing it would save worlds. Even if crossing it would win wars. Even if crossing it would seem, in that moment, completely justified. Because the Imperium does not fear failure nearly as much as it fears precedent. One exception becomes permission. One forgiven transgression becomes doctrine. And once that happens, even angels of death can become something far worse. So as this story unfolds, remember this: the fear Space Marines feel is not fear of dying. It is fear of being judged. Fear of being unmade. Fear that everything they have fought for, their chapter, their legacy, their gene seed, could vanish without ceremony, without resistance, and without appeal. And once that happens, there is no coming back. Across the Imperium of man, the image of the Space Marine has been carefully cultivated into something almost divine. To the average citizen, an Astartes is not a warrior but a symbol, proof that the Emperor still watches, that humanity still matters, that salvation can arrive clad in ceramite and fire. Entire populations fall to their knees when a Space Marine walks among them. Children are named after chapters. Cathedrals are built around fragments of shattered power armor. The myth is deliberate, and it is powerful. Space Marines are not bound by the same rules as ordinary men, because they are not ordinary men at all. This belief is reinforced everywhere. Planetary governors surrender command the moment a chapter intervenes. Astra Militarum generals defer strategy without protest. Even high-ranking Adeptus officials choose their words carefully in the presence of an Astartes. The message is clear and consistent. Space Marines exist above the fragile web of Imperial law, answering only to their chapter masters, their primarchs, and ultimately, the Emperor himself. They are instruments of necessity, and necessity does not ask permission. For the Space Marines themselves, this separation is internalized early. From the moment they are taken from their former lives, they are taught that they are no longer part of humanity, they are its shield. They do not fight for recognition, gratitude, or reward. They fight because no one else can. This distance from common law becomes part of their identity. Rules are for those who can afford restraint. Space Marines are forged for survival at any cost. And for centuries, this belief appears justified. When chapters act independently, the Imperium survives. When Space Marines make brutal decisions, worlds are saved. Entire alien empires are extinguished because an Astartes commander chose efficiency over mercy. Each victory reinforces the idea that Space Marines must be trusted completely, or not at all. To question them would be to invite hesitation, and hesitation, in the Imperium, is synonymous with extinction. But myths have a dangerous side effect. They encourage forgetfulness. They allow people to believe that power alone guarantees loyalty, that strength replaces accountability, that reverence can substitute for restraint. And somewhere deep within the Imperium's endless archives, written not for the masses but for those who rule, is proof that this belief is false. Proof that even the most perfect weapon can become a liability if left unchecked. Because the Imperium has learned, through catastrophe and betrayal, that no being, no matter how engineered, how indoctrinated, how revered, can be allowed to exist without consequence. And the higher the pedestal, the more catastrophic the fall. This is where the myth of the untouchable Space Marine begins to fracture. Not in open rebellion, not in heresy, but in silence, in missing records, in chapters that should exist but don't. And in a single law that stands patiently in the background, waiting for the moment when belief finally collides with reality. In the Imperium of man, nothing ever truly disappears. Worlds can burn, populations can be exterminated, and entire star systems can be declared lost, but records remain. Everything is catalogued, archived, and preserved in endless data vaults and sanctified scrolls. Victory is recorded, defeat is documented, even failure has a place in the Imperial ledger. And yet, scattered across these archives are gaps, empty designations, redacted passages where entire histories should be. Not destroyed by accident, but removed with intent. These absences are the first real cracks in the myth of the untouchable space marine. Among scholars of the Administratum, there are quiet, unspoken rules. Certain questions are never asked. Certain records are never cross-referenced. When a chapter's battle honors abruptly end, when heraldry is quietly reassigned, when campaign victories are attributed to units that were never present, those who notice quickly learn to stop looking. Because curiosity in the Imperium is rarely rewarded, it is managed. Space Marines notice these absences too. They do not need explanations. They understand what missing names imply. Every chapter keeps its own histories, its own records of lineage and honor. And in those private archives, the erased chapters are remembered, not celebrated, not condemned, but acknowledged as a warning. A reminder that loyalty alone does not guarantee survival, and that power does not grant immunity. These missing names are never spoken aloud in council. They are never referenced in training halls. But they exist in implication. In the way chapter masters pause before making certain decisions. In the way librarians grow cautious around forbidden research. In the way apothecaries treat gene seed as sacred beyond reason. The silence surrounding these lost chapters is not enforced by fear of punishment, it is enforced by understanding. Because whatever happened to them did not happen in battle. They were not destroyed by Xenos. They were not consumed by chaos. They were not broken by internal rebellion. They were unmade by the Imperium itself, not as an act of rage, but as an act of policy. No declarations, no public censure, just removal. A surgical correction to the historical record, as if the Imperium were erasing a flaw from its own design. This is when the realization begins to settle in. Space Marines are revered, yes, but they are also monitored. Watched not by mortal eyes, but by systems older than any chapter. By laws that do not need to threaten, because their enforcement has already been demonstrated. The myth of invincibility survives only because the truth is buried beneath layers of silence. And that silence speaks louder than any proclamation ever could. The Imperium of man does not create laws lightly. Every rule, every prohibition, every absolute command exists because something went catastrophically wrong in the past. Humanity does not legislate in hope, it legislates in response to disaster. And when it comes to Space Marines, the disasters were not theoretical. They were real, they were devastating, and they nearly shattered the Imperium before it even understood what was happening. In its earliest days, the Imperium relied on trust. The Emperor believed his creations would remain loyal because they were designed to be loyal. Space Marines were given independence because they needed it. They were unleashed across the stars to conquer, to unify, to burn away resistance in the name of survival. And for a time, it worked. Worlds fell into compliance. Enemies were annihilated. Humanity expanded at a pace that seemed unstoppable. But unchecked authority does not reveal its danger immediately. It reveals it slowly, in rationalizations. A commander bends doctrine to secure victory. A chapter modifies its mission to better suit its strengths. An exception is made here, a deviation justified there. None of it appears treasonous. In fact, it all appears logical, necessary, efficient, and that is what made it terrifying. The Imperium began to realize that Space Marines were not just winning wars, they were shaping reality. Deciding which worlds deserved to live, which cultures were worth preserving, and which interpretations of the emperors will mattered most. They were no longer merely instruments of policy. They were becoming authors of it. And once that line is crossed, even loyalty becomes dangerous. This is when fear truly entered the equation. Not fear of rebellion, but fear of divergence. Fear that two loyal chapters could interpret the same command in radically different ways, and both be correct by their own logic. Fear that the Imperium could fracture not through heresy, but through conflicting obedience. 1,000 loyal wars, all fought for the same cause, tearing the Imperium apart from within. So the Imperium did what it always does when faced with uncertainty: it drew a line. A line that could not be crossed, no matter the justification. A law not designed to micromanage Space Marines, but to remind them that they were never meant to decide the future of humanity on their own. That their role was to execute the Emperor's will, not redefine it. This law was not born from hatred or mistrust. It was born from experience. From the understanding that even perfect weapons must be limited, not because they are flawed, but because their perfection makes them too dangerous to be left unbound. And once this law existed, everything changed, even if no one spoke of it. To understand the law that binds even Space Marines, you have to understand how the Imperium values order above all else. Not justice, not truth, order. The Imperium survives not because it is righteous, but because it is rigid. Every institution, every title, every ritual exists to keep humanity moving in the same direction, even when that direction leads straight into horror. Chaos is not just an enemy, it is the ultimate failure state. And nothing creates chaos faster than power without a final boundary. The law that would one day terrify Space Marines did not begin as a threat. It began as a contingency. A final safeguard written into the very structure of Imperial authority. Its wording was intentionally narrow, almost deceptively simple, because complexity creates loopholes, and loopholes invite ambition. This law did not concern battlefield conduct, collateral damage, or even mass extermination. Those were already accepted realities. Instead, it addressed something far more dangerous: the moment when Space Marines stop seeing themselves as servants of the Imperium and begin seeing themselves as its stewards. At first, this distinction seemed academic. After all, who knew the Emperor's will better than his own creations? Who could protect humanity more effectively than those engineered to do so? But the Imperium quickly realized that belief itself was the problem. Because once Space Marines believe they are responsible for humanity's future, obedience becomes conditional. Orders are weighed, commands are interpreted, and loyalty transforms from submission into judgment. This was the line the Imperium could not afford to let them cross. The law was finalized in silence. No public proclamation, no ceremony. It was distributed only to those who needed to know, embedded within the deepest levels of Imperial protocol. Chapter masters were informed obliquely. High lords acknowledged it without discussion. The Inquisition recorded it not as doctrine, but as inevitability. Everyone involved understood the implication: this law would never need to be enforced often. It would only need to be enforced once, publicly enough to be felt, quietly enough to be denied. And that is what makes it so terrifying. Because when a law does not rely on fear of punishment, but on certainty of outcome, resistance becomes meaningless. There would be no appeals, no negotiations, no heroic last stands. Once the line was crossed, the response would already be in motion. Not vengeance, not outrage, just removal, as if the Imperium were correcting a mathematical error in its own existence. Space Marines were never told to fear this law explicitly. They were simply shown the consequences of violating it, through absence, through silence, through chapters that vanished between one record and the next. Over time, the message became unmistakable. They could destroy worlds. They could condemn billions. They could make brutal decisions in the name of survival. But they could never claim authority over the Imperium itself. Because the moment they did, the Imperium would remind them, without hesitation, that even gods can be unmade. At its core, the law is brutally simple. No Space Marine chapter may place itself above the authority of the Imperium, nor claim the right to determine humanity's fate independently of it. Not in open rebellion, not in secret, not even in the name of salvation. The Imperium does not care why the decision was made. It only cares that the decision was not theirs to make. This is why the law terrifies Space Marines more than any enemy ever could. It does not forbid violence. It does not forbid extermination. It does not even forbid genocide. Those horrors are already built into the Imperium's survival strategy. What it forbids is something far more dangerous: sovereignty. The moment a chapter decides that it knows better than the Imperium itself, that it will rule, judge, or reshape humanity according to its own vision, it has violated the one command that cannot be forgiven. The wording of the law leaves no room for interpretation. Intent is irrelevant. Outcome is irrelevant. A chapter could save a sector, preserve billions of lives, and still be condemned if it crossed this line. Because the Imperium is not afraid of losing worlds. It is afraid of losing control. One independent Space Marine empire, one self-appointed guardian state, one chapter deciding it will govern, for the greater good, is enough to fracture the species forever. This is why the law is enforced absolutely. Not through courts or proclamations, but through procedure. Once the violation is confirmed, there is no escalation, no debate, no chance for repentance. The Imperium does not argue with weapons, it retires them. The chapter's name is struck from record. Its heraldry is destroyed or reassigned. Its victories are rewritten. Its gene seed is seized, sealed, or erased entirely. The warriors themselves may die, may vanish, or may be redeployed in ways history will never acknowledge. The result is the same: they cease to exist as a chapter. And this is the truth Space Marines live with every day. They are not afraid of death because death is simple. Death is honorable. Death is expected. What they fear is irrelevance. Oblivion. The knowledge that everything they are, their brotherhood, their sacrifices, their legacy, can be deleted by a single administrative action if they ever forget their place. This is why even the most proud chapters remain careful. Why even the most independent-minded Space Marines stop short of claiming authority. They understand something most of the Imperium does not, that survival is not the highest priority. Control is, and the Imperium will burn 1,000 heroes before it allows one to become a king. This is the reality every Space Marine carries with him, even if he never speaks of it. Chapters do not gather to debate this law. They do not train to resist it. They do not plot around it. And yet, its presence is as palpable as the ceramite on their armor, as constant as the hum of bolters in the night. Every mission, every campaign, every battle fought across countless star systems is shadowed by a silent question: am I still serving the Imperium, or have I begun serving myself? The most terrifying aspect of this law is that its consequences are invisible, until it is too late. There are no public trials. No grand executions. No proclamations on crystal screens across the sector. Instead, its punishment is surgical, precise, and absolute. The chapter is removed from history. Names vanish from records. Gene seed is confiscated, destroyed, or locked away. Worlds that once knew the chapter forget it existed. Monuments crumble quietly. Battles that defined a generation are quietly reassigned to another unit. And the Space Marines themselves, those who once walked among the living legends of the Imperium, fade into obscurity, remembered only in whispers by a few who dared to know too much. This is why even the most seasoned Space Marine feels a tension beneath his discipline. He can face the most monstrous demons, the most fanatical heretics, the most hopeless odds, and yet the idea of violating this law evokes a shiver that no gene forging, no indoctrination, no centuries of experience can suppress. Loyalty to the Imperium is not enough. Valor in battle cannot save a chapter from erasure. Strategy, cunning, even the preservation of billions of lives, none of it matters if a single line is crossed. And yet, paradoxically, this law ensures the Imperium's survival. It forces its greatest warriors to maintain focus, to defer their judgment, and to accept that some decisions are not theirs to make. It is the invisible chain that keeps angels of death obedient, the silent hand that restrains godlike power. Without it, even the most loyal chapters could fall into fatal independence, interpreting salvation as authority and protection as sovereignty. For the listener, this is the moment where the scale of the law's power becomes clear. Space Marines fear not the enemy, not chaos, not annihilation. They fear the Imperium itself, and the precise, unyielding justice it delivers to those who overstep the line. And that fear is not abstract. It is constant. It is inherited. It is learned in every initiation, every lesson, every whispered warning. It is the understanding that to exist outside this law is to risk everything, even the centuries of honor and sacrifice that define them. The first time the Imperium had to enforce this law in full, it was not done in anger, nor in spectacle. There was no trial, no decree, no great battle to mark the event. Instead, it was quiet, precise, and utterly final, a methodical correction of a mistake that could not be allowed to repeat. A chapter, loyal beyond question and courageous beyond measure, had acted in what they believed was the Emperor's best interest. They had saved billions, defended entire sectors, and fought with the ferocity that had made their name legendary. And yet, in doing so, they crossed the line. They assumed authority that was not theirs to wield. They decided that their judgment could supersede the Imperium's. To them, their actions were righteous. To the Imperium, they were intolerable. The punishment was neither symbolic nor slow, it was absolute. The chapter was struck from history as though it had never existed. Records were altered, victories reassigned, and the gene seed carefully contained or destroyed to ensure no further replication. Every member, every warrior who had been part of that chapter's legacy, faced either obliteration or reassignment under identities that would never carry the name they had earned. Their deeds were forgotten, their victories erased, their existence reduced to a footnote only visible to a select few who understood what had been done. For Space Marines who survived elsewhere in the Imperium, the message was devastatingly clear. Even loyalty, even valor, even life or death heroics could not protect a chapter from unmaking if it overstepped its bounds. The law was not a suggestion. It was not a threat. It was the ultimate boundary of obedience, and crossing it meant erasure, nothing less. This original transgression became a cautionary tale whispered quietly among chapter masters and librarians alike. New recruits were taught that the Imperium does not forgive mistakes born of hubris, even when that hubris is masked as devotion. The fear of being unmade, of having centuries of honor wiped away as if it had never existed, instills a discipline far beyond what bolters, blades, or gene forging can teach. It is this knowledge that keeps the greatest warriors of humanity restrained. The law is a shadow that falls over every decision, every deployment, every campaign. Even when worlds burn or the galaxy teeters on the brink, the line cannot be crossed. To violate it is to risk not just death, but oblivion. And in the Imperium, nothing terrifies a Space Marine more than the thought that all he has fought for could be erased with a single, silent act. The answer lies in the fate reserved for those who violate the law, the fate that no amount of courage or loyalty can evade. It is not the battlefield that instills this fear. It is not the demonic entities lurking beyond reality, nor the alien tyrannies that seek humanity's extinction. All of these threats are tangible, measurable, and, even if lethal, finite. What the law enforces is far more final, complete erasure from existence and memory. When a chapter is judged to have crossed the line, the Imperium does not summon a tribunal. It does not offer counsel. It does not even explain itself. The wheels of enforcement turn in silence, carrying out a punishment so absolute that history itself is rewritten. Names disappear from records, battles are credited to others, heraldry is stripped, and the gene seed, the very foundation of the chapter's existence, is quarantined or destroyed. What remains is a void, a deliberate absence that communicates more clearly than any decree, they never were. For Space Marines, this is more terrifying than death because it attacks the essence of who they are. A warrior may die in battle and still be remembered. His deeds may echo across the stars. His chapter may honor him, and humanity may recount his valor. Oblivion, however, denies all that. It denies history, legacy, and identity. It is a punishment that strips away the meaning of their service, leaving only silence. The horror is not merely the end of life, it is the negation of existence itself. Every chapter understands this instinctively. It is why even the most independent-minded leaders hesitate, why even the most courageous warriors temper their judgment with obedience. They know that no battlefield victory, no heroic act, no act of devotion can shield them from erasure if they overstep the law. Loyalty and valor, while virtuous, cannot override it. Survival itself is irrelevant. And yet, paradoxically, this absolute fear preserves the Imperium. It ensures that the galaxy's most powerful weapons, the Space Marines, remain obedient, focused, and aligned with Imperial authority. Without this law, even the noblest chapter could grow into a threat. Even angels of death could decide they are the ultimate arbiters of humanity's future. With it, their godlike strength is tempered by the shadow of oblivion, a silent reminder that control, not freedom, is the Imperium's greatest priority. The law does not punish because it wishes to destroy. It punishes because it must. And for every Space Marine who has ever taken a gene seed oath, the knowledge of what awaits those who defy it is a weight heavier than any armor, more binding than any vow, and more terrifying than death itself. The Imperium is a web of authority, with layers of command so intricate that even its most loyal servants can become lost within them. The Inquisition is tasked with rooting out heresy, corruption, and threats that imperil humanity itself. They can summon worlds to judgment, censure entire organizations, and execute their will across sectors with near absolute power. Yet even they hesitate when dealing with this law. Even they understand that it is a boundary no mortal, or even superhuman, should cross lightly. The reason is simple: the law is absolute. Unlike any other mandate in the Imperium, it does not allow for negotiation, reasoning, or appeal. It does not matter if a chapter acts out of devotion, necessity, or desperation. The line has been drawn, and the consequences are inevitable. Even an inquisitor, who can wield the Emperor's judgment like a blade, cannot reverse it. Attempting to do so risks far more than the ire of a single chapter. It risks destabilizing the very structure that preserves humanity. The Imperium is not governed by compassion or fairness, it is governed by survival. And this law is the Imperium's safeguard against its most dangerous servants becoming sovereign. Attempts to circumvent the law have failed before. Chapters who sought exemptions, advisors who petitioned for leniency, even high-ranking officials who tried to reinterpret its wording, all met with quiet, uncompromising correction. No one is above it. Its enforcement is surgical, selective, and terrifyingly effective. The message is clear: no one may claim authority that the Imperium has not granted, not even those who wield the Emperor's own power. This creates a delicate balance of fear and obedience. Space Marines, knowing the absolute consequences, operate with unparalleled discipline, yet that same discipline is tempered by the ever-present shadow of erasure. Even the most aggressive strategists hesitate before bending the law. Even the most battle-hardened veterans calculate risk not just in lives lost or objectives failed, but in the subtle possibility of crossing that forbidden line. It is this tension that preserves order across a galaxy in constant turmoil. While worlds burn, civilizations fall, and demonic horrors encroach from the warp, the law ensures that the Imperium's deadliest instruments remain obedient. Fear of oblivion is stronger than fear of death. Control outweighs chaos. And even in a galaxy where gods of war walk among mortals, the Imperium remains unchallenged, because everyone knows that violating this single law comes at a cost far worse than any battlefield defeat. The answer lies in history. The Horus Heresy, the darkest hour of humanity, taught the Imperium lessons that were seared into every surviving institution. Betrayal can come from anywhere, even from the most loyal, even from those deemed perfect. Trust, once broken, is never fully restored. The law that governs Space Marines is a product of that painful clarity. It was not written to punish indiscriminately, but to prevent the recurrence of catastrophe. It is the invisible boundary that ensures the mistakes of the past are never repeated. Even the most powerful Primarchs, those who could command fleets and armies single-handedly, are bound by it. Even Rebute Gilliman, resurrected and charged with guiding the Imperium through its darkest modern era, cannot repeal it. The law is not a suggestion to be debated or a policy to be amended. It is a line drawn in the bedrock of the Imperium, immovable and eternal. Chapters that flirt with its edges do so cautiously, aware that even the slightest misstep could summon the same final, erasing judgment that claimed their predecessors. And so, the law endures. It endures because the Imperium's survival depends not on the heroism of its warriors but on the restraint imposed upon them. Space Marines do not fear death, they fear annihilation in a way that no weapon, no demon, and no Xenos army could inflict. They fear the erasure of their legacy, the silence of history, the knowledge that all their victories, sacrifices, and honor could be wiped from existence in the blink of an administrative decree. This law serves as a chilling reminder to all. The Imperium does not merely command its warriors, it shapes them, contains them, and, when necessary, removes them entirely. Power without limits is dangerous, but power tempered by fear of erasure ensures obedience. Space Marines may be the Emperor's angels of death, the galaxy's ultimate weapons, but they are still instruments, not arbiters. Their might is unquestionable, but it is bound, not by chains or threats, but by a law older and more absolute than any of them, a law that ensures even gods of war know their place. In the end, Space Marines do not fear death, chaos, or the universe itself. They fear being unmade, their existence denied, their legacy obliterated. And that is the ultimate power of the one Imperial law that even Space Marines fear.